Judy, I'd love to start with you sharing about your training, which I think was 1973. Is that correct?
My training started in 1973, correct, with JR.
With
Yes.
J.R. Worsley.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
The training itself.
Yeah.
I had spent the year before looking for an acupuncture teacher in the States. I was recommended to travel to England to start a program with Professor J.R. Worsley. I had never met him. I had never had acupuncture. And I jumped at the opportunity and thought I may as well at least go check it out. So I flew to England in the spring of 1973. I had just finished law school, which was a matter of just passing time until I found what I really wanted to be doing in life. And that was the start of my training.
Great.
It was an intensive American program, which meant that JR was with us, 10 to 12 hours a day, lecturing, teaching practical skills. Literally, it was boot camp. We were in class, I think it was 27 out of 28 days. And he was on fire. He was teaching us full throttle. And it was fantastic. It was brilliant.
That sounds amazing. And you've told stories before about the first time meeting JR, but maybe you can just tell us about that, but also tell us about JR himself, just so that people who haven't ever had the chance to meet him can get to know him a little.
Well, my first meeting with him was after I'd looked at my watch because I was thinking of leaving. Because the first morning of class was with a lovely older woman who was reading a paper, and then two other people were presenting odd bits and pieces, and I was calculating that this probably was another dead-end street because I'd looked at a lot of programs in the States, and I thought, okay, this isn't going to work either. And then JR came in and he started talking, and I was on the edge of my seat within minutes. And what was captivating was his genuineness. And the startling contrast of a man dressed in a three-piece suit, immaculately presented, immaculately groomed, almost military, shined shoes, perfect tie and shirt, and everything was just so perfect, talking about spirit and natural order and being of service to other people, and this being not a profession or a work project, but a way of life, committed to helping other people, and that we're here as brothers and sisters to help each other. And I just felt like I had landed in heaven, that this was music to my ears. He was so genuine and so, when he looked at you, he had just such conviction and genuineness in his eyes. So that was the start of a fantastic way of being in this world. And I'm now 75, and I feel so blessed that I've had this life, which isn't over yet.
I'm so glad of that. So Worsley classical 5-element acupuncture is spoken about as a medicine based on natural order or natural laws, as well as a way of life. Can you share with us a little bit about what is Worsley classical 5-element acupuncture, and what does it mean to be a medicine based on natural order?
Well, I can tell you that both what the Chinese taught and what JR taught resonated as being as the same message, although what JR taught was not from books. It was from his experience, which is that nature is teaching us what's within us. So the macrocosm and microcosm views that the Chinese referred to, JR lived according to. What you experience outside is a projection of what's within us, and what's within us is a reflection of what's around us. So the best way to know ourselves is to observe the natural order that is presented to us. So the seasons, and which are the basis for the 5 elements. So there's the 5 seasons, and there's the elements associated with them, and then associated with each of the elements are the meridians or officials, as they're known, which is the functional aspect of the meridians. And then, of course, there's the points on each of the meridians that each carry also a spiritual capacity, or a spirit of the point, as it's referred to. So it's an amazing way of being in the world in a meaningful way, because life is so interesting and fascinating, because the natural order at the heart of it is that nothing is, everything's in a cycle and in change, and equally, each of us is unique and different. So it's fascinating. And learning to live in accord with the natural laws and the natural order put us in a wonderful position to be instruments of nature to help each other. So we don't fix each other or fix symptoms. What we do is we act as an instrument assisting nature to restore the balance within each person that comes to us. And that is a very humble way to be in the world. It's a very modest view, and it's a very humble view, and it's a very simple and elegant view. And it brings health and well-being to the practitioner. So for me, it's a path of my own spiritual evolution, to live in accord with the natural laws and to live in accord with, that doesn't mean living according to doctrine, by the way. It's a very simple message to be yourself, to know yourself, to be humble, to be willing to learn, to be willing to be of service, which comes naturally, because once you fall in love with the natural order, the only thing you want to do is to be of service. It's not a chore, it's an honor, and it's a privilege. Yes, and a blessing. It's a blessing.
So it seems like you're speaking about a way of life, as was mentioned earlier, in the sense that the way you are in your whole life, it sounds like, is also the way you'd be bringing it to your work. And that's an important thing, that it's not a work situation when you're with clients. That's a completely different way of thinking and being than when you're going about your life.
Because we're also human beings. So we're also beings that have been conditioned and habituated, and we have our lives that we've lived. So yes, the potential is there to live in accord with natural law, but I'm not going to pretend that that's what I do all the time, by any means. But it's a possibility, and it's, how can I put it? It's certainly a captivating and wonderful opportunity to live that way. But I'm not going to claim that that's how I live all the time.
Yeah,
we're all human beings, and we're all distracted away from the natural order, as we would put it. But it's a direct path if you're willing to humbly ask and to observe, then you can follow this direct path, which is a way of helping other people, but it's also a direct path for yourself. How to discover yourself and to discover how you can be in the world in a meaningful way. So what I found so interesting is that I know there's a lot of emphasis, just like in every religion, every spiritual practice, you have doctrine that's been written down over the ages. You have the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. I don't want to be limited in terms of naming different religions, but there's many, many, many different doctrines. So you can discover, you can discover life through doctrine, or you can discover life through the eyes of the people that actually wrote the doctrines, which was a way of describing and helping people by pointing to the moon. But the moon is not found within the doctrines themselves. They're pointing to God or the moon or whatever metaphor or description we want to put to it, or spirit or the Tao or whatever label we put. But the fact is that the doctrine doesn't actually contain the essence of what is the essence of who we are. What it contains is suggestions or possibilities, or giving pointers for how to discover these things. What I found so fascinating with JR is that what he seemed to observe and share with us was sourced from within him, and as a matter of what was transmitted to him directly from his teachers. So it's both a blessing and a curse that we didn't use books and doctrines as sources. The blessing is that it's a direct path. The curse is that some people have found that as a basis of criticism over the years. And it's like saying if you don't read the Bible, you can never experience God, which, as we know, that can't possibly be true.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible is there to give us
insight
and suggestions of where to direct our attention, but it's not the end of the journey in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So the classic texts in Chinese medicine are wonderful recordings of inspired sages who were able to observe and to experience what JR was sharing with us and transmitting to us. So I was very fortunate. Yes, I was very fortunate to be with him.
Yeah. And there's a number of different 5-element traditions in the acupuncture and Chinese medicine world. What's unique about how's Worsley classical 5-element acupuncture different or unique compared to some of those other 5-element traditions out there?
Well, I'll quote JR to start with. He used to say, human beings will make human laws, and human beings will come up with human stories. So once human beings get involved, it's almost irresistible to the human mind to start creating narratives and stories and imagination and fantasy about the world around us and the world within us. And that takes us away from the essence of classical 5-element acupuncture. The transmission that JR received from his masters, as I said before, was a direct oral tradition. And when you speak to somebody and you look in their eyes and you talk to them and you show them and you're with them, there's something very direct about the experience, rather than trying to surmise and figure things out from intellectual or academic sources. So there's a lot of 5-element threads, as we could call them, or developments. Some based on people who studied with JR and have decided they're going to put their own spin on things, which is, there's many examples of that out there, and some from different directions. I mean, JR wasn't the only one who taught 5-element. What I prefer is clarity and integrity, so that people, if they want to present their own view of 5-element acupuncture, they do it under their own name, not to use someone else's name, because it gets confusing. It gets very confusing. Yes, it's confusing. So there are different methods and modes of 5-element, and some people, without permission, sail their boats with using JR's name and reputation to promote what they're doing, which actually is a shame because it just can be confusing. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. And it's kind of silly. It's like a piano teacher trying to pretend that what they're playing is a cello. Or something like that. I don't know if that's the perfect metaphor, but we wouldn't dream of doing that because it just would seem so silly. And there's no need to pretend. Just be honest about what you're doing. But human beings, as JR said, and his prophecy was correct, need to parade themselves in a particular way to promote what they would like to be seen as, or what they'd like to get in the world. And because we're Western based, most of us, and certainly modern based in terms of the modern contemporary schools, we are subject to cultures that have a huge emphasis on status and accomplishments and material success and etc. That's one of the reasons I love JR's teachings. I came out of a highly academic background. I went to a very high-level school. I went to Washington University, which is a very well thought of school. And I went to law school. And those academic successes just didn't touch the depth and the beauty of what JR was teaching. However, it was, what I liked about it is not something that a lot of people would like. It didn't teach you how to be successful in business. So what's really been amazing, and I remember in the early 70s when we were young practitioners, at the end of the day, this was in Oxford where we had a wonderful clinic, we would say, can you believe we spent the day doing what we love doing and helping people, and there's money in this pot at the end of the day. And so we were able to become comfortable and successful without chasing money, without chasing it, without making it a goal. It rolled in, but it rolled in as a result of doing something we love doing. And I just feel so blessed.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Do what you love and love what you do, and life has a way of taking care of itself. It's amazing.
JR was pretty meticulous with succession planning, and I think partly that was to honor his teachers, really. And can you explain what his succession planning was and why he did it, and how is it working?
Well, partially he was conscious of the fact that he had a responsibility to pass on what he was given, because that's how it was given to him. He had to sign up. He didn't have to, but his masters asked him to commit by oath that he would protect and transmit what they were giving him faithfully. And one of his teachers asked him to sign a written, on one half of it, it's written in Chinese, and then there's a translation, it's on parchment, and he had to sign it, and it's an oath, committing that he will remain faithful to the integrity of the teachings. And so he did that with me, and he did it with people that he invited to be apprentices who stayed with the principals. Some people said they were apprentices, but they didn't stay with the principals. So he sought out people who he could trust. And one of the reasons why trust was an issue is that, again, human beings being human beings, he was hurt many times along the way by trusting people close to him who put other priorities on top of being, or before being, humble and open and honest with him. So he put into practice, he was a very clever man. And I think people mistook at times. His sweet nature and his sweetness and his fun-loving nature for being not as clever as he was. So after a final pretty tough experience in the 90s, starting in the early 90s and the next few years, he thought, okay, we're living in the modern world. I'm going to use modern mechanisms to protect this. So he set about setting up the Worsley Institute. He co-founded the Worsley Institute, which you're president of, David. And this is a good opportunity for me to say thank you for everything you're doing to create a very solid organization fulfilling its mission, which is to protect JR's teachings and to promote them. So thank you, and the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, really doing an amazing job. You are doing what JR, you're fulfilling his dream. So one of the mechanisms or the practical things that he put into motion was co-founding the Worsley Institute, which is a not-for-profit organization. He and I opened or established the Worsley Inc., which is a private company at the same time, which was to hold certain properties. And then the other very important structure is the Worsley Intellectual Property Trust, which I'm a trustee of now, and so are you, and so is Eric Hartman and Annette and Sessions. And the function of the trust, again, is to hold the manifested works of his teachings, so that hopefully the purity and the integrity of the teachings can be protected by the very means that are also threatening it, which are modern, legal, materialistic means. So I thought he was very clever to say, let's use the means that are out there. So he did that, and then he designated me to please carry on as the leader of our lineage, which I'm doing to the best of my ability. And I committed myself by oath, just as he had. And I'm working with apprentices because of my age, and also that I have a responsibility to have a succession plan, which I'm, as you know, kind of not obsessed by, but I'm on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems that lineage is important in this tradition, and having a really clear lineage and integrity of the teachings.
Lineage and respect. I love working with Heiner Fruhoff, who's an amazing scholar of the classics, and discussing the ancient principles that are embodied in the classics that are so beautiful, and seeing how what JR taught from his heart is also an embodiment of these principles. One of them being respect, which unfortunately in today's culture, it seems to be that respect has taken on a very dim value, and it's been replaced with entitlement to have so-called equal this and equal that, and it's against natural law. It's against natural order. And as JR says, and the Chinese say, look to your elders, look to children, and look to nature, especially animals, as our teachers. You will see I have sheep, and I have hens, and I have geese, and I have ducks, and there for sure is a natural order. And it's beautiful. They can live very harmoniously once everybody understands the laws of respect and the laws of the natural pecking order. And it doesn't mean there's domination and submission. It means there's an understanding. And once there's an understanding, it's harmonious. I had 2 little lambs that I raised a year ago who were rambunctious. And when I let them be with the flock for the first time, they were not out of control kids, but a little bit rambunctious without any socialization. So they were running around, and they couldn't wait to go up to these big sheep and not charge them, but kind of without any consideration for the fact that some of them were a bit feeble, just run up to them, and they got headbutted. or they got put in their place. And within weeks, everything settled down because I was a bit worried, are they going to get hurt? And they weren't hurt. What they were was trained and socialized. And as you know, because you've been here visiting, when we go out there, they're one big happy family. So you can't impose laws of we're going to be one big happy family. But what you can do is live according to natural law, and one big happy family naturally arises as a result of honoring the natural order of things, respecting the fact that we have elders. We have elders who have been here for a while, and they pass to us wisdom and experience if we're willing to listen and to be humble. Humble and willing to honor the fact that their experience maybe sound old fogey at times or maybe old-fashioned, but it's got huge value if we're willing to listen. But that willingness is not a strong... am I sounding like an old lady now? A little bit, probably.
Well, I think it comes back to these principles of natural order. Lineage is just one more aspect of that. So it is integral to our medicine.
And people who do tend at times to use JR's name as an eagerness to promote what they're doing, that quality of respect is missing. It maybe not intentionally, but it is missing. And that's a shame, because it ends up creating confusion and lost souls leading lost souls, which it's an interesting comment that in our modern age, where we've got the most sophisticated technology and accomplishments for being comfortable and going to the moon and just incredible engineering feats. There is more confusion, human level, despair, unhappiness, depression, anxiety, emptiness, loneliness than ever before.
Very much.
So these so-called successes don't bring what's really important in life, which is peace and freedom inside, and to be untethered in a way that we can live our lives to the fullest extent that God has given us the capacity to do and to be. But we become tethered with these cultural and mental attitudes, which Jer predicted. That's the other thing. I was fascinated as a 23 or 24-year-old in the early 70s listening to him. His predictions were not always pretty. He was very concerned about ecology, very concerned, and about how we're polluting. He called it abusing our mother. He said, we've got to change what we're doing. We've got to change how we're living. How many pairs of shoes do you need? How many cars do you need to drive? He was very concerned about what was happening on the planet. An early voice, certainly in my life.
Yes.
So,
in the kind of theme of this symposium was about the diversity within Chinese medicine, and there's often a conversation around integration or mixing different things. Can you share a little bit about that? Especially as we've just kind of followed up on this idea of lineage and practicing with integrity. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I love Italian food, and I love Indian food, and I love Vietnamese food. I love Mexican food, Chinese food, and English foods, and American, and I really like to eat, but I would not relish at all taking all of those different cuisines. I love Middle Eastern and Greek, and it's nameless. The Moroccan. I would not relish taking all of those cuisines and integrating them into one big vat and saying what we've done is we've made a mixture of all these wonderful cuisines and now let's eat this. It would be awful. You'd lose the essence of what each one gives us. So it's the appropriateness and it's how we use these things. So integration can be a blessing, but it can often be a curse. I decided a long time ago that I was in love with this lineage and this way of being, and I find it to be complete in itself. And as JR taught us again and again, there's nothing wrong with the system. You need to look at yourselves. It's the person holding the instrument and how you use the instrument. But I saw colleagues and myself tempted at times to blame the system for my failings instead of doing what he said. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror to see how you're failing to be humble instruments, how you're failing to hear what nature's saying to you through color, sound, odor, and emotion, which is the most direct path to diagnosing the cause of a person's imbalance. And through doing that, you are able to be an instrument to assist that person to return to health and well-being. But we don't get there by imposing all kinds of tricks and symptomatic treatments. Now, I'm not dismissing symptomatic. I had an accident years ago, a lorry or a truck ran over my foot. That was not a good time to have my pulses taken or to be asked about my social history or my medical history. I was very happy to be carted to the emergency room in an ambulance and have my foot sorted out ASAP. And I was also very happy 3 days later to have someone notice that my foot was turning blue and the blood was cut off and they had to whip the cast off because it was too tight. So those kind of urgent symptomatic treatments saved my leg. So it's the appropriateness. But what we're faced with is a culture of more is better. And we've forgotten the simplicity of sometimes less is better. Less. Know what your instrument is and master it. So if I want to have osteopathic treatment, I go to an osteopath. I don't feel the need for a 5-element classically trained, Worsley trained 5-element practitioner to know body work, herbs, homeopathy. I want to go to a master of each one of those disciplines. So that's my view and JR's view as well on integration, that it very often is over tempting. A very fine classically trained musician will usually master one instrument. You don't find many master pianists who pick up every instrument. They master one instrument and play in a symphony or play a solo. But they don't also insist that because they use pedals on a piano, that if you are playing a violin, you have to have pedals. There's respect for what each instrument has to offer. So again, we're back to the idea of respect.
Yes.
And the clarity. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but imagine fumbling for pedals on a flute.
You wouldn't find them, would you?
No, but that's the silliness of how we apply ourselves.
Yeah.
Theoretically, in other contexts. And then we get frustrated. We get frustrated because we can't do X, Y, or Z, and we realize that we're using our instrument the wrong way.
Absolutely.
And we're not looking within to see how we're limiting our capacity, how we're limiting ourselves to use what we've been given.
Yeah.
and then we think, oh, well, if I can't play the flute, then I'll grab the piano and the cello and the trombone and just keep adding things to the point of being overloaded and overwhelmed and not good at any of them, which just adds to the frustration.
Yeah.
So I hope that metaphor helps. I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think those themes of clarity, integrity, a way of life, natural order, all in the lineage bring us back to that lineage. And I really appreciate you continuing to share that lineage with so many people, because it is helping not only practitioners, but all of the people they touch. So we really appreciate it.
I appreciate Worsley Institute doing what it's doing, and I'm so happy to be part of it. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you all for listening to this out there. It's a very odd experience to look at a camera lens and know that there's people eventually going to be on the other side of this lens. So thank you for joining us.
And for further information about Worsley Classical 5-Element Acupuncture, you can go to our website, www.worsleyinstitute.com. So thank you for joining us.
Bye for now.